Good morning, welcome back to another We Are Sunderland morning briefing in partnership with the Fire Museum and Cospex Opticians. It's been a busy couple of days before we get stuck in everything red and white. Obviously, if you head over to We Are Sunderland, you could be in with a chance of winning one of 10 of the new Sunderland home shirts that we're giving away. We're giving away those to lucky subscribers and loyal subscribers. So if you've already been subscribed to We Are Sunderland from the get-go, you could be in with a chance of winning one of those. Joe, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not bad, mate. You?
Yeah. Busy as ever. It felt like London buses yesterday. It felt like everything was happening. Before we get stuck into that, we'll go back a little bit, have a little bit of a rewind. We went to the club shop opening. The launch of the new home kit's gone down an absolute storm. I mean, it's been a positive couple of days. It certainly it feels anyway, that the mood has changed an awful lot since then. But just on the club shop, I mean, it's fantastic in there. It's great. I mean, I could have done with a pink slice on Thursday night, but they gave them out to people on Friday. So, I suppose I can't complain too much.
No, it's a really good setup. It's a bit more modernised as well, isn't it? And bigger space. Obviously, I know they ended up selling out of the stock 8 weeks worth of stock, wasn't it? Yeah. The statement came out released, but, good amount of stock in. And, yeah, just you touched on it right at the start. It was finally felt as though there was a week of sort of productivity and a positive week for the club to have, if you stems right back to the appointment of the head coach, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You got that. You had the goalkeeper signing. Obviously, then there's always a little bit of a buzz when the fixtures come out because it allows supporters to put dates in the diaries and potential runs of games and things like that. Then you had, like you say, a superb kit launch, which was always going to prove popular, wasn't it? But I think they got it down to an absolute T. Just the marketing and the production of that, like the campaign, the video, the shirt itself. How humble have launched it, because there's a good bit of nostalgia and a good bit of history there anyway with the partnership with the two. And then the club shop as well. And I thought it was really good that key members of staff were there. I think that was because, again, you don't necessarily have to do that, do you? So to get the likes of Speakman, Dreyfus and the new head coach Regis Le Bris there, it was really, really good move and a really good week. And it's almost like it doesn't take much, does it, to get supporters on side. I mean, obviously the important thing is going to be what happens over the next few weeks into the start of the season. But just to have something and just feel a little bit more involved, just have that tangible bit of involvement was so key. And you can already feel that there's a little bit of a momentum shift, which is now being built on, of course, at the start of this week as well.
Yeah, I thought it was quite, I don't know if surprising is the word, to see Kirill there. Obviously, he was a big factor behind it. If you haven't watched our YouTube video yet, David Bruce obviously speaks about Kirill really wanting it to happen. 2 ownership groups before him wanted to move the shop, but he was able to do it. So it's something that he's kept a close eye on. I think just over the way that the past 6 months or so have gone, arguably before that, just with off the pitch sort of stuff, he hasn't shirked away from sort of the public eye in that sense. But like you say, I think, we are riding the crest of a wave of positivity at the minute. We'll talk about, the rest of the stuff that's happened this week. But whether he's, it just feels like he's not shirked away, at least for now anyway. Obviously, he's always going to come under scrutiny for the way he manages the club. It happens to everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think the key for me is the actions and speaking louder than words statement. I keep find myself going back to that statement that Mike Dodd said. And, I think David Bruce almost touched on a similar sort of thing when he did the interview earlier in the summer as well. It's finally a little bit of actions following the words, isn't it? And that's all supporters want. And I think, Kristjaan Speman's come out this week, hasn't he, and sort of said the comms could have been a little bit better in the course of the summer. And it's just finally a little bit of substance to the words that the supporters have had. And that's always going to help the case when there's something there, like say, tangible to back things up. And it's a good start. It is a really good start to this sort of new cycle of the new season. Yes, it's only a club shop. It's only a shirt launch. Fixtures, they come out every year. But off the back of getting the head coach and getting the first signing in, again, only just a backup goalkeeper, but just things, building blocks going in place to set you up for the real business starting this week with pre-season training underway.
Yeah, and I suppose, what do you want to go for? Do you want to go for the big bit, the relatively big bit, or the minor bit? What should we go for? We'll go for the big bit. We'll start with Chris Rigg. I mean, that is massive news, isn't it, in terms of contract? We've sat there and spoke, repeatedly about someone keeping their key players. He is, I think he'll go on to play for England one day. That's just my opinion. his ceiling is so high, it's unbelievable. Obviously, there was a bit of a delay with him wanting to wait to see who the new head coach was, but there'd been a deal there agreed in principle for quite some time. He's yet to sign that, obviously, but we're led to believe that he will. 3-year deal. I mean, massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. It's sort of twofold. It's a big statement from the club, and it's a good vote of confidence from the player himself as well. Because at the end of the day, regardless of his age, he knows that there's been big teams circling and interested in his services for next season. For Sunderland, I mean, it plays into the way they did it last season. I think Mike Dodds referenced that quite a few times, didn't he? As poor as the end of last season was, he was the shining light in it, and getting him incorporated into the first team setup and start and then regular game time towards the end of the season, even though results didn't go as well as everyone would have hoped. That was a big positive, and you imagine that'll be a big factor in Chris Rigg's decision to stay, if that is going to be the case, which we believe it is going to be. But yeah, massive statement of intent from the club, because again, we've spoke about before on this podcast where key players, younger players with potential, have been allowed to be sold on for any sort of fee. That clearly isn't the case under this ownership group, whether it's younger players or senior squad players. They're still younger players as well, given the model that they've got. But players aren't going to be allowed to leave for anything less than what was described as a premium fee, and that backs it up. And they're keen to keep these players. So huge statement of intent to keep him. I mean, you think now as well, what would his market value be if he signs a 3-year deal, even though he's played 10 starts in the Championship, around that number, I think 20 games all in.
Yeah.
What would his value be now if you're looking at some of the fees that are going around for players who've only had a season's years of experience, and then compare it what could be next season? We spoke about Job in that aspect, haven't we? What his value could be in 12 months' time. If you think Chris Rigg with a full season under his belt, wow, there's huge potential there. So great statement of intent from the club, and yeah, big vote of confidence from him as well in the new manager, because it's clear that he wanted to see who the new head coach was going to be. Was concerning how long it was taking, names coming in and out of the frame. So to get the new head coach in, and within 10 days, a deal, as he seems to be happy to agree that deal, it tells you that there's obviously been proactive conversations with Regis Le Bris. So yeah, that bodes well as well. So really looking forward to seeing him knuckle down now and what he can bring over the course of the next 3 years. Or Bill, man.
I don't know about you, but some of the figures being bandied about at the minute are a bit daft, aren't they? Like, we're sat here thinking, for example, the reports have been saying Jack Clark 20 million, and then I'm sat there sometimes thinking, that's maybe a bit too much. Are they going to get that fee? And then you see, no disrespect to Archie Gray, but Jack Gray absolutely tore him apart last year. I know they're different players. There's a different age gap between the two of them. People like, I think Archie Gray will go right at the top, but you talk of the fees in between. You've got Douglas Luiz has gone from Villa to Juventus for 50 million, and the fee being talked about Archie Gray is 45 million. It's the fees at the minute. So, like you say there about Chris Rigg, Job. What if Job has another full season under his belt? What's the value of these players going to be? And then for me, this is what everything comes back to with this current ownership group, and we're yet to see. We've had one summer where it was pretty poorly reinvested. If you want to talk about the money put in from the Ross Stewart sale. This is the defining sort of summer, I think, or defining period anyway, the defining next couple of transfer windows to see how this ownership is sort of measured by supporters.
It is as well. I think the Clark one's the interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm like you, where you sort of put that 20 million price on, you think, oh, is that being a little bit realistic? But you see some of the fees, for players who, even like Premier League players, you look at Newcastle this week, who've sold 2 players for £70 million who haven't got a lot of Premier League experience in there. Great business. So then you think, well, the player who's going to be stepping up to come in, is 20 million enough when you see some of these fees? So, Sunderland are absolutely right to be doing what they're doing and driving a hard bargain, and they are not going to be sold short for any of these players, and that is encouraging for supporters. As worrying as it will be to lose a player, someone like Clark in particular, that there's going to be a heavy fee involved to be repaid. So, they're going about the business the right way in that sense, and Rigg's only going to add to that, no doubt about it.
What role do you think he's going to play next year? You've obviously done a little bit of looking at the Regis Le Bris tactically. I found it interesting. Mike Dodds obviously spoke with us in one of the final few press conferences last season and said, about why Chris Rigg's played out there. He gets more time. He's not, he's not in the middle of the boiling pot, so to speak. it's interesting because obviously he's played generally as a number 10 throughout the whole, of his younger career, youth setup at Sunderland. Do you think we'll see him come inside? Personally, I don't think we will just yet, but I don't like it's not something that's completely out of the question. I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, the first couple of weeks under Regis Le Bris, we'll see how he's obviously going to set up.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we could see him go in there this season. You might be right, not necessarily to start with. Much of that might depend on the recruitment in the centre of midfield. Yeah. Dan Neil's dealing with the injury as well. We don't know where his fitness levels are at just yet going into pre-season. But I think long term, we've said it quite a few times, I think it's made for him to move straight into the middle. And if Regis Le Bris is going to play those 2 10s, you could see him operating possibly in one of those positions as well. It is going to be an interesting one if they stick with a 4-2-3-1. You can easily stay out wide on the right as well. But there's a lot of competition, isn't there, in the wing positions? We've spoke about that plenty of times. No one really grabbed the shirt last season. There's a lot of spots open for grabs. Obviously, if Clark stays, that'll take one of them out of contention, you'd think. But it wouldn't surprise me if he does move into the centre midfield, because that is obviously where his long-term future is going to be. He plays there at national youth level. And we've seen with Dan Neil as well how he never really got the chance to start out wide, did he? He was just thrown straight into that melting pot that you mentioned, and he's adapted and adjusted. It's about giving them a little bit of rope, isn't it, and putting your faith in them at times. And I think the deal with Rigg, getting him involved in senior team last season, I think it's naturally just going to work its way towards him going into the middle. Now the question is whereabouts. Will it be the 6, the 8 or the 10? You can probably play either of them. Again, I think a lot will depend on the recruitment and who comes in and how someone strengthen that area of the pitch, because that is a key area that they do need to strengthen this summer.
I mean, it's interesting, the return to pre-season yesterday. Regis Le Bris spoke for the first time on his interview. Simon Moore's come in, first incoming. We've had, a bit of a revamp in the goalkeeping department. We're doing a bit of a scouted series this week, just assessing the Sunderland squad, potential names, the odd fun name that could come in there. We'll have a bit on the fullbacks out later today. So if you want to read that, again, it's just £1 for 6 months worth of subscription. I find it interesting. Look, I'm not going to pretend that it was a shock decision, the Callum Styles one, the fact that Sunderland haven't taken up the option in the loan clause, that they had with Barnsley. But what do you think that means because he was a versatile player, but I'm sat here having looked at the squad and looked at the areas that they need. You've got Niall Huggins, who's out with long-term injury. You've got Trey Hume, Timothy Pembele at right back. You've got left back Dennis Serkins coming back in. You've got Leo Hjelde and Aji Elise can play there. Do you think they need another fullback this summer? Because I've sat there and looked at it. Obviously, again, we're speaking without knowing how they're going to set up, but they do have options there. But it certainly felt like, obviously, with Styles coming in last summer, that it was an area that they were trying to address.
Yeah, it felt a little bit stopgap, didn't it, in January for him coming, particularly given, as we spoke about a few times, his natural position is obviously in that midfield role. You'd like to think that Sunderland aren't going to be as unfortunate with injuries in that area of the pitch, because there was times last season where they were really, really struggling. We had Jensen Seal going out the right back, so Trey Hume would go out the left back. You'd like to think that isn't going to be the case this year. I think with Serkin being fit, if he can stay fit, likewise with Elise, you've got 2 players there who are more than comfortable playing in that position, and more than adept at being doing a good job there as well. And like you said, Leo Hjelde as well, he can fill in there. He would then become almost the option, wouldn't he? So, yeah, I can understand the decision on Styles. I think it's more so in central midfield that would be, if we're getting rid of or not going to bring someone in who can at least be an option in that area, it tells me that you'd like to think that there'll be someone, at least one, coming in that position. And then really you need more than that, don't you? Because then you'll need what Styles would have been in proving an option. So, yeah, not overly surprised that a deal wasn't agreed, because he did. We spoke again. It was difficult for him because he was coming off the operation. You don't know how much that factored into things. Came into a team that was struggling as well. Shifted around, not necessarily in his natural position, so he probably didn't get a fair crack at things. But then equally, in the games that he did go into centre midfield or even at left back, was there enough there to justify paying a sizable fee to bring him in on a deal if you think you can go and get a better option somewhere else? Evidently, they've decided not.
Yeah, it felt strange, didn't it? I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there by saying, there was mitigating factors. He's came in, and the Sunderland themselves as a whole weren't playing particularly well at all. But I don't feel like it's hard to. I don't know. I just don't feel like he ever stood out. I don't feel like he did anything spectacular. Leeds away was okay. Sunderland were, they were vastly improved that game compared to what they had been in previous games. I know they'd won at West Brom before that, but that certainly, for me, obviously the summer and January, they felt like, okay windows. They weren't. That was the problem. Nobody came in and sort of grabbed the team by the scruff of the neck and helped lift them up a couple of levels.
Absolutely, and that's why we've said again about this summer. You could go back sort of 3 transfer windows. I think in the piece that I did last week, it was there's a strong case to make it where there's been 3 successful windows and 3 not so successful windows. This one needs to tip back in the successful way, doesn't it? Still early days, but now that you've got the head coach in and things getting underway, you'd like to see some movement coming in, certainly over the next week or two, just to see where they're going to operate as well in terms of your priorities. Is one of the first signings going to be a striker? Is it going to be a central midfielder, or is it going to be sort of padding out other areas first? If they'd have kept Styles in, for example, you would class that as one of those that would be padding things out. So, yeah, really interesting to see how things are going to develop over the next couple of weeks. But obviously, that just that stability with having the head coach in now and just being able to get stuck into that sort of thing is just such a massive relief and a massive weight off the shoulders, you imagine, for the hierarchy as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got people like Elliot Embleton coming back as well, who will feel like new signings. Again, I know he spent the last couple of seasons out on loan. It does feel as well, like I like Elliot Embleton. I feel like he could still play a part in this team. He was great in the promotion. Yeah, obviously scored the opening goal at Wembley. But it does also feel that the squad needs a bit of a trim, doesn't it, in certain areas? You've got Nectar Strantis coming back on loan. You've got Jewison Burnett, who spent, had a tough loan spell. You've got Eliza Mayenda. There's a lot of people who, as we said, a number of occasions last year, there's players on the fringes who aren't quite, they don't feel to be like they're at that level yet. And we saw if they're not at the level in Sunderland's team last year, then what level are they at?
Yeah, well, that's where it becomes the second season, doesn't it? You've got to make sure that some of these second-year signings from last summer have to step things up, particularly the ones that you mentioned there, the ones who've been out on loan. Club have obviously deemed it necessary for them to go out and get that experience because they're not going to get it in-house. Have they come back better players? There's quite a few of them who haven't featured anywhere near as much as the club would have liked. I would have thought, Bennett didn't play very often. Mayenda didn't play as often as you would like neither. So 2 there in particular, yet there's still plenty of time on the side in terms of their age. But given Sunderland's model, and we talked about Chris Rigg at the top of the show, lads, it'll come through 17-year-old, 16-year-old, doesn't matter if they're good enough, they'll sort of muscle the way in. So it's up to those players coming back off loan now to really sort of have a good pre-season. And that's along with the likes who had disappointing seasons last year or seasons struggling with injury as well. So many players need to have really good pre-seasons between now and the start of the season in August. So, yeah, I agree. I think there's quite a few positions where you'd think they could do some trimming, but equally pre-season's that's what that's there for, isn't it? You can determine whether they're going to be suitable enough for the first team squad or whether there's better options to bring in and then do a deal for another loan deal, or has things worked out as well as they would have liked.
I mean, they're not afraid to do that. I mean, I know I've had this conversation before on here where they've got rid of, for example, Isaac Lahaji. It didn't work for him. They cashed in on him. Could they do the same? I mean, time will tell, won't it? But it certainly feels like, up to this stage anyway, all the right noise has been made. They've stuck to their guns. Obviously, they've got safe standing, etc. Everything put in the stadium. Some people will be like, yeah, great. But at the end of the day, everything's going to be measured by the success on the pitch. Now, obviously, experience. Yeah, we'll go again. Rub your hands together because we're going to have another chat about experience. But that's it. We've had a bit of a delay with, obviously, the transfer news. I mean, the head coach situation at Sunderland has sort of encapsulated it all, hasn't it? It's taken everyone's attention. Interestingly, this week, Divin Mbuma left West Ham. Not someone with, a great deal of experience, so to speak, in terms of, appearances. But he's someone that Sunderland have been linked with a long time. He's played in Europe. He would certainly see it will appear to be a coup. But as we've said already on this podcast and on, various pieces on We Are Sunderland, it's fine to bring him in if you also bring in experience with him and someone who's got a bit of nous at playing at championship level.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see something happen with that, because there was talk of him potentially staying. I think West Ham did offer a contract, didn't they? Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. You would imagine there will be some suitors, and the way Sunderland do their business here is a very sort of an attractive proposition for players like him. Again, look at Chris Rigg that we're talking about coming through the ranks. Many other players who've gone, there's experience there with Pierre Echo and Adji Alisi who've come out of that academy as well. So wouldn't surprise me if those links intensify again with him over the next couple of days and over the next week or so. But I totally agree. If you're bringing him in, he cannot be your number one striker, because it's A, unfair on him coming in and being expected to burden that, and B, it's just you need more depth in there. We saw that all of last season. Every week we were talking about the striker situation. Every week the manager, whoever it was changing who was in there, rotating around 3 or 4 different options. That can't happen this season. You need someone to go in there and cement the spot. Now, I'm not saying that someone like David Mbeumo couldn't do that, but you'd be reticent to think that is that the right way to go about it. You certainly need, I think I said it last week on the pod, you need someone who's going to come in and absolutely be able to be a recognised starter in that position, who you would look if they went somewhere else in a top 6 team and think, yeah, he's a good signing. That is the sort of player that I think someone in that centre forward position and the number 6 position. They might take time, deals like that could end up running to the end of the transfer window, which I know supporters don't want to hear, and it's frustrating every season that happens. That is just the nature of how the window happens. But that is the one that you really, really need someone who's scored goals quite routinely in the Championship, that it's so paramount that they get that. And then you bring someone like Mbeumo in as well, who can feed off that and then add a little bit more and be a supplement to that, who could then maybe kick on and take that role 18 months down the line, for example. That is personally how I feel as though it needs to go. Whether it does or not, obviously, remains to be seen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's something we've been saying since, January time on these pods. Interestingly, you mentioned the transfer window, what time players come in. That, again, sort of, I'm going to link it back to last summer, because that it's not a problem, because, a lot... How am I trying to articulate this? Yeah, a lot of people, they put a heavy emphasis on pre-season. It's really, it's a key part of the season for a head coach to get their ideas across. But last summer, you had strikers coming in at different parts of the window. So this year, in theory, they're all in the building at this time. They've all been around the club for the past couple of months. They're all aware of each other. They don't have to get used to the new surroundings. They're all here in the building. Obviously, they've only got to get used to Regis Le Bris style of play. So in theory, you don't have that hurdle, if you want to call it that you had last year. So I feel like we could see one or two kick on. I mean, this might be wishful thinking, but I certainly feel like we need to see something from, Luis Jimenez Semedo. I mean, we saw Rusin, as we said last year, he's probably the furthest ahead of any of them. Mayenda, we need to see something from some of these in pre-season to justify that, because at the minute it certainly feels like there's more questions than answers.
Absolutely, but one thing that goes in their favour with there being a new head coach appointment is it's a clean slate for everyone. Yeah, and like you say, with them being in the building now, they don't have to adjust to moving to the northeast and just the rigours of the Championship. They kind of know what's coming, so it's a clean slate for them, and it's a real chance for one of them to just grab the shirt. Like I said, there's quite a few of those spots that you'd argue are available. I mean, there's some people would argue majority of the team shirts are available after the second half of that season, and you can't really disagree with that given the form. But certainly the forward area is a position that is open for grabs at the minute until somebody comes in who you think, he's the number one. It's absolutely open for grabs. So that's why this pre-season is huge, whether it's players who weren't here last season coming back from loan spells, or whether it's people who were given a goal last season. Regis Le Bris is going to want to see all of them given a shot, and you'd like to think that we'll see that over pre-season. That's the point of it. It's up to them then to really stamp their authority and how much they want to make it work, because ultimately, different cultures, a lot of them came from different leagues and things like that, where it might just work differently. Mentally, it might just be a little bit different. Yeah. It's up to them now to really sort of state their claim and make sure that it's their shirt to have.
I mean, we'll be speaking with Regis Le Bris, and I presume Kristjaan Speakman will be there tomorrow. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how they go about it, and just the in-depth analysis of the head coach search, what the plans are with the transfer window, how Regis Le Bris thinks he's going to set up. We did the tactical piece. Yeah. Is it going to mirror with some of the things that we saw with Lorient and things like that? Yeah, it's always nice for supporters as well to get more in-depth look at how things might look over the next couple of weeks, and then obviously once the games start as well, we get something tangible to see in terms of performances and systems and setups and things like that. And hopefully, like we say, 1 or 2 transfers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with the Lorient reporter from the Keepers piece, obviously over on Sunderland, more looking at the type of character Le Bris is, and actually it was quite insightful, to be honest with you. Everyone's pointing out the relegation last season. I think the Lorient president has since come out and said that that's on him as president. People are pointing the fingers. Obviously, he's the manager, head coach. They lost. There's a lot more that went on at that club beneath the surface than what it first appears. If you just look at the table, they got relegated. So is character something that's quite interesting? I think obviously there's been fears of, a yes man. I think that's perhaps a bit of a false narrative that, Sunderland are hiring head coaches who are just going to get on and do the bidding. I mean, Alex Neil certainly wasn't a yes man. Tony Mowbray wasn't a yes man. Michael Beale certainly came out and said some things that perhaps didn't tie in with the club narrative. Having spoken to, my contact over in France about, what sort of character Le Bris is, straight talking, straight to the point, not a dictator, he said, but he likes everybody to do things his way. So that's very interesting. I certainly don't feel like what we've seen historically anyway ties in with this yes man narrative. And obviously, look, time will tell. But I certainly don't feel like he's going to be the man who's going to sit there and just, be Churchill, the nodding dog, and just, agree with everything that gets put to him.
Yeah, but it is a myth that's sort of going to need squashing as well, because you can understand why supporters would think that, just given the names that were linked and then came and went during the head coach search, and with it taken so long, that just with the territory of it, that is something that the club will have to dispel, and that will only happen as well. Positive sort of press conference tomorrow, but also with then how pre-season and the early stage of the season goes with results. Results are the only thing that matter.
Yeah.
If Sunderland start the season well, if Regis Le Bris gets off and goes unbeaten in August, wins 3 out of the 4 games in August, transfer window ends quite successfully, all of a sudden nobody's really bothered about that narrative, are they? So that'll come in time, but obviously again they can put the building blocks in place for that tomorrow. So that'll be one interesting point that will come across as well. And just how far up the list he was, how long they've been targeting him. And interested to see how he comes across. The club interview, he spoke quite a lot about the sort of history and the foundations of the club. It feels as though he's really key to tap into that. Obviously went to the club shop opening, a lot of talk about the passion of the supporters and the fan base and things like that. So I thought it was interesting as well that he started taking up his English sort of a couple of years ago in expectation or hope that he would probably come over here as well. And that was probably before he took over at Lorient as well. That even as an academy coach, he felt as though that this was the next step to come over to England. So yeah, a lot of fascinating stuff in there, and it's always nice to be there and see them and see how they operate in that environment. So quite looking forward to it, yeah.
I don't know as well. I don't know if it's because we're sort of in, I'm under no illusion how big a football club Sunderland is. It's just maybe, given that it's been in League One, I think sometimes it's used as a rod to beat, Sunderland supporters with that, you're not in the Premier League anymore, etc. But this club is massive. If you get it right, you've seen from the kit launch, if you get it right, this club can be huge. Like, it's got the highest attendance outside of the Premier League, and I had to watch that last year of just dreadful performances, and that there's no look. We can't sugarcoat it. It was awful in the second half of last season. As you say, if he comes in and they get this right, it can be a juggernaut. There's no limits. There's no reason at all why this football club can't be back in the Premier League. It just needs a little bit of magic, a little bit of sprinkling in the right places, and we saw under the first season under Tony Mowbray that I can easily finish in the playoffs.
Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth there. You saw how it can quickly build and snowball with momentum with what Mowbray managed to do. And I agree with what I think when we did the big verdict with the forwards. I agree with what Scott said. There's the potential that the ceiling is higher than probably what it would be with somebody else. But on the flip side, the floor could be lower as well. It does feel as though it's like one of those appointments. You just hope that obviously it's in the other way and heading towards the ceiling, because it's right. You look at sometimes other clubs where they'll bring an appointment in from the outside. A lot of people might not have heard of or done the research about, and then you think, oh well, might be a bit risky. But then you might watch them 6 months down the line in the Championship and they fly, and then you think, oh well, why does that never happen here, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, Chef Wed's a perfect example, aren't they? And Danny Rowe.
Absolutely. In there's evidence of that over the seasons, throughout time, really. So you just hope that can be the way that it goes for Sunderland this year, and then 12 months down the line, we're looking at after a great season, and what a great move it was, even despite the struggles early on in trying to get him appointed, that, you know, you can see everything just falling into place and how they wanted the model to work, because this is the one that is really the closest to how they want their model to run, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hope that kills you, isn't it? So
Absolutely,
we'll soon find out. We'll soon find out. No, thanks for joining us this morning. We'll be back later in the week once we've heard from Regis Le Bris tomorrow. Obviously, again, we're hoping Kristjaan Speakman will be there as well. If you haven't yet, head over to We Are Sun and subscribe. It's just £1 for 6 months worth of coverage, and you could potentially win one of the brand new home kits for next season. We're giving away 10. It's one per person. Don't get too excited. And if you haven't yet, just drop us a subscribe over on YouTube as well. That's completely free. So you don't miss a single podcast or video. We're in partnership with the Farm Museum and Cospex Opticians. Catch you later in the week.